Since the initial release of the Alpha Kit print and plays, I've played a lot of games. A lot of games. Each new week has introduced new cards into the mix that I've analyzed, and I've been testing as often as I can to get a better understanding of the game. I've competed in a few small-scale tourneys, taught a few people how to play, and playtested a ton of different decks out to see what works and what doesn't given the current context of the available cards that we have to play with. I've decided to share some of my observations in a series of videos I'll be releasing over the next few days where I will be ranking every current card as of June 28th. I know there will be a lot of new cards added by the time these videos are released, and I'll revisit these videos later on to add the newly released cards to these lists after sufficient playtesting. These tier lists are broken down into 3 videos. The first video, I covered all of the legends that are currently playable. This video will cover all the unit cards, and the last video will cover both programs and gear cards currently available in the game. These videos will be rather lengthy, so the justifications for each card's placement will be brief. But if you're curious or even upset that I ranked cards in certain tiers, please let me know in the comments below and I'll be happy to flesh out my experiences a bit more to explain myself better. One last caveat before we begin, this is all subject to huge changes and it's mainly just for a bit of fun. When we have all the cards available, no doubt this list will be completely changed from what it is currently. These rankings are based on how strong and how often I see these cards being played in the current pre-release beta format of the game, using the rules currently available on the Cyberpunk Trading Card Game website. There are 31 units to review in total, so let's get to it. I'm starting the list off with the most expensive and naturally powerful unit in the game. I'm putting Atom Smasher into D tier. Now I know that seems harsh, but he's just not being used much right now. The biggest reason is because people just aren't using mono yellow that much. In fact, I see more tricolor decks than anything else currently because you just have access to so many options. Going mono yellow isn't really worth it solely to play Atom Smasher. Even though you can ramp him out faster, it's still not fast enough, and wiping out your own board is still potentially a huge detriment. The other Smasher, the Legend, is an A tier even though he costs just as much because he can attack the same turn he's played. Smasher is essentially a win more card, and while impressive on paper, in practice so far, it just isn't good enough yet. Alright, Gilded Matone is next. Initially, this guy was everywhere, but I'm seeing his inclusion less and less, and I'm honestly not sure why at the moment. His removal effect is very good, especially now that there are so many cheap utility units in the game that he can remove. I'm assuming it's because he's slightly clunky and that you have to sacrifice a gear card first, so it requires some setup there. But I'm putting him solidly into B tier right now, though a case could be made to bump him up into A tier because of the landscape of units being introduced into the game. Placide is going to the top of A tier, and he may even be an S tier unit. Of all the big boss monster cards, he's unmatched as his removal effect is just too good. He's got 10 power too, so yeah, best of the boss monsters in my estimation for sure. Oda is the next boss monster to look at. He's pretty good and definitely is that card folks tend to forget about and not plan for, and it's very hard to plan for this guy just because he can come out of nowhere, spend one of your units, and then smash it. So yeah, solid boss monster for green. A tier. Brigitte. Brigitte has the same removal effect that Placide has. The problem is she has to pitch twice as many cards to use it, and she can only target units that don't have equipment on them already. It's still a good removal effect, but with the higher cost and the restrictions on the target, I'm putting her into C tier right now. When we have more tools to work with, as far as trash pile recursion and the like, I feel there'll be a good case to be made to bump her up a tier or two, but for right now she's just not used that much, and it's quite a high cost to pay in order to remove something. Alright, Evelyn Parker is our first of those cheap utility units I talked about when ranking Gilded Matone. The effect is strong for the cheap cost she has to play, which makes her a good first turn play to jumpstart your game. The problem her and other cards like her face is the ever-growing number of removal effects in the game that can easily target her. I understand the need to remove power from these cheap units as the aggro style of the alpha format made games end far too quickly, and these cards definitely have a place in your deck, but they are not monsters of the meta like they used to be. I'm gonna go ahead and put her and the others like her into B tier. So Sketchy Ripper and Misty both share similar properties to Evelyn, so they're all kind of lumped into that same category there. Alright, next we have Blue Eyes White Dragon, Jackie. Jackie's the next big brute to review, and like the other late game units, he's going into A tier. He's got great stats for the cost, and not one but two insanely powerful abilities. He's not as broken as he used to be during the alpha format, but he's still incredibly strong, especially for that cost. And I might even consider him S tier as well. Alright, S tier is looking a bit empty, so let's fix that right off by looking at another group of similar units. The Cheap Blocker crew. La Llorona, Mox Insiders, and Corpo Security are all going into S tier. Blocker is the strongest keyword in the game, so obviously they're all going into the highest tier. Let's also take Secondhand Bombus here and rank him too. Now he's going to go into A instead of S because the Bombus comes with no innate power. The Secondhand Bombus can be equipped with gear and can even make attacks, unlike Corpo Security, but the main use of this card is going to be to block an attack. All of these cheap blockers have power, which means that they all hard counter the 2-cost utility units. Now, those utility units are forced to attack in order to get their abilities to trigger, meaning you can play one of these cheap blockers on your turn to hard counter those utility units and defeat it in combat when they have to attack with it. Even if that unit is equipped with like a Mantis Blades to give it 2 power, you'll still at worst trade with it if you're using Corpo Security, or defeat it outright if you're using one of these 3-power ones like Mox Insiders or La Llorona. I personally rank Mox Insiders as the highest of them all because I'm a blue boy at heart, and this card can force your rival to attack with one of those cheap utility units, whereas your rival may want to hold off on doing so if you play one of these cards in response to what they'd played. The Minotaur is a strong boss monster with a very good removal effect and high power, so it's going straight into A tier with the other big guys. Modded Kusanagi is an interesting card. It's got good stats and can attack the turn it's played, which is really cool. You do have to return it to your hand afterwards, so you do lose board presence when you're using him, which can be pretty detrimental. But this guy sniping out a unit out of nowhere, or just stealing a gig, is really good, so it's a solid B tier unit. Caliber is a very good A tier unit in my book. Caliber has a reasonable cost to stat ratio and a very nice removal effect that can pop those utility units and can even force your rival to discard cards when defeated. So this card gets you value when played, when attacking, and when defeated, so you're getting use out of it no matter what happens to it pretty much. So yeah, A tier for sure. El Sombreron is next, and while I do like the gimmick of having a possibly insanely high attack power for it, I feel that it's quite rare to pull off with all of the gig manipulation in this game. I've not seen many people try to use this card, to be honest, and it also requires heavy red investment to do so. While I've seen a few folks use double red in their decks, I rarely see them run this guy. His effect can be fun to try and would feel really cool to use and get a big payoff for it, but there are just other better options than red to field for 5 eddies instead. So he goes into C tier. Following El Sombreron, we have Emergency Atlas. Now it's not a terrible unit, as it's a cheap 3-cost, 4-power vanilla unit, but it's just kind of there. It's considerably weaker than many other units in the game, so it will be defeated in combat pretty easily. If you drop a few of these at once and implement a kind of go wide strategy, it could work out, but most people are playing units with effects and or higher power, so this thing's not going to stay on the board for too long. Alright, so next we have the Flathead. This unit is going into A tier. This card has a high power for the cost, and it's the only sellable unit in the game, which is really cool. The major reason that helps this guy get into A tier is the fact that it can weave through blockers to steal gigs. We have quite a large number of blockers in the game right now, so being able to punch through your rival's defense is incredibly powerful. Alright, we have Hanako up next, and she's going straight into S tier. She had a major glow up from her previous version, and in the mid to late game, she can net you a lot of cards drawn to your hand to help set up your late game plays. If you need more cards to sell, pitch, or you're looking for a specific card to play, you can easily manipulate your gigs to hit that number that you need before using her, and you have a good shot of finding that card. She's a solid unit, and you should be running at least one of her if you're playing in yellow. Carry Uridine is a solid unit. He's cheap and has a respectable 5 power, and his ability is very good. He's going to go into B tier because while he is a fairly solid unit, most of the other units in red are just better picks overall to take up a slot in your deck. Speaking of better red units, we're looking at Meredith Stout. Stout is the best unit in the game. She's cheap, she's strong, she's a freaking blocker. She gets extra power when fighting those Go Solo legends that are all over the place. And she has a crazy strong ability to get you cards from your trash pile back into your hand when your gigs are messed with. And like I said, there are a ton of ways to mess with gigs now. So she will force your opponent to think twice before touching any of your gigs. Otherwise, they're just going to give you free cards in your hand. And the beauty part is you get to choose which card from the trash you want. So you can just pull the perfect answer to whatever your opponent's doing at the time. She's hands down the most improved of all the revised cards and has my vote as the best unit currently in the game. Alright, let's shift gears. Get it? Cause car? Well, the revision of Riding Nomad is a pretty solid B tier unit in my estimation. It's a bit weak for the cost, but has the ability to attack the turn it's played, which can come in very handy. The preem scenario with this card is leaving your board open for your rival to attack you with one of those cheap utility units, thinking that they'll get a free swing on you without any kind of reprisals, and then you play this on your next turn and just knock that thing out of the game. It can also be used to sneakily steal a gig in the late game, potentially, which is really cool. It's rather weak though, so it's susceptible to more of the removal cards in the game, and it's just flat out getting defeated in combat by many other cards, so B tier is where it's going to live for now. Alright, now this might sound a bit crazy, I know, but I'm putting Swordwise Hustle into A tier. The big reason she's so high, where the other cheap unit, Emergency Atlas, is so low, is her ability is incredibly strong. If you pair her with a Mantis Blades, she hits that required 5 power mark, allowing you to draw a card every attack. Pair her with Satori, and you defeat a rival unit, and you're drawing 2 cards. She's an excellent early game aggressive unit that can get you a gig and card advantage over your rival starting on your second turn. Do not sleep on this card, she's quite good. Next is her old Alpha deck counterpart in yellow, T-Bug. T-Bug was also altered and made weaker and more expensive, but with a pretty cool ability to get you a free legend call upon defeat. Now T-Bug is a decent B tier unit, and it's one I almost never see played. She might be the rarest unit I've come across in my games. Since legends are so cheap to call now, and there are many other units you'd rather be playing, T-Bug doesn't really have the same desirable qualities Swordwise Hustle has, or some of those other 4-cost yellow units do. The next card is the exact card in question when talking about other units you'd rather be playing. Off-Duty Malfini is an amazing card and has the same AD cost as T-Bug, but with 1 more power, and the awesome ability to force spend a rival unit, setting you up for a desirable combat situation to defeat a rival unit or bypass a blocker to steal a gig. It's just so good. He's one of the better turn 2 plays you can make, and he's always being played in decks splashing yellow, so he's going into A tier for sure. Now I'm going to pair the next 2 together here since both are statistically the exact same. 6th Street Recruits and Psycho Squad are both cheap and powerful beaters. 6th Street gets the edge though for being a ganger unit and also for having a very strong gig manipulation effect, but both are amazing cards in all phases of the game, but especially early on when 6 power is quite daunting to deal with. Both of these are going into A tier. Lizzie Wizzy, the Queen of Control, is next, and she's right up there with Meredith Stout in the top of S tier. Her being a blocker is great, but getting 2 uses of the same Chrome Reverie card and stun locking a rival unit is so powerful and satisfying to hit. It's incredibly frustrating to be on the receiving end of, and she's just all over the place. If your opponent's playing blue, they're going to be running Lizzie Wizzy and trying to stun lock you, so just expect it. It's gonna happen. Royce is next up, and it was one of the few cards I fell in love with quickly for the design behind him. He's a tad expensive, but his removal effect is great for popping those cheap utility units all over the game. So, like Caliber and Gilded Matone, his usefulness has only improved and will continue to do so as more of these card types are introduced into the game. So he's going into A tier. Alright, we're at the final unit here, Wraith Marauders. Wraith Marauders has a very powerful ability, which basically turns him into a mini Pan Am, as you can get 2 attacks from the same unit in a turn, provided you meet the requirements to use his effect. And with all the gig manipulation out there, it's not too tough to do that. You can do some pretty crazy combos with this card and other cards like Pan Am, or even a second copy of Wraith Marauders, to hit an ultra combo on your rival. He's a great aggressive card in green that really highlights their nimble playstyle, and as such, he's going into A tier. Alright everyone, that concludes the second installment of the small series of videos. Do you agree with my list? I'd like to hear other players' perspectives on where you think some of these units should be placed based on your own experiences in playtesting. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to check out the other videos in this series. The final one will not be far behind this one, where we check out all of the program and gear cards. I'll see you then. Goodbye.